Welcome experts Ken Hansen, Mason Cole, Juan Diego Calle, and Michele Jourdan. Todd Greene, General Counsel of Oversea, will moderate the session. It's all yours, Todd.
All right, thank you. I guess this is the unofficial welcome to DomainFest for those of you who actually managed to get out of bed for a 9:30. But I guess it being on the first day, we didn't have the party the night before. So yes, I'm here to talk about new TLDs, and I do have an esteemed panel of colleagues here who certainly know a lot more about new TLDs than I do. I'll do a brief introduction of each member on the panel. Then each member of the panel is going to do somewhere 5 to 10 minute kind of presentations. We'll then do our own Q&A, and then we'll open it up for Q&A from the audience. So first, to my left is Mason Cole. I'm not really sure I know him at all, other than having worked with him for the last 4.5 years. Mason is now a principal at 5x5 Communications. As all of you know, Mason is an 11-year veteran of the domain name industry and was previously responsible for PR and industry relations for the Oversea family of companies, including Snap Names and Moniker. Mason was elected chair of the ICANN Registrar Stakeholders Group and is also currently serving as a member of ICANN's GNSO, or Generic Name Support Organization. Ken Hansen, who is sitting to Mason's left, is Senior Director. Thank you. Senior Director for Business Development at Newstart.
Ken.
If Ken looks familiar, that's because I think he's probably been on every panel at DomainFest over the years. So we always appreciate Ken being here. Ken is one of the most knowledgeable people in the industry. Ken has led business development efforts that resulted in Newstar's entry into the registry business, the award of .biz by ICANN, and the Department of Commerce selection of Newstar to operate and administer the .us TLD. And prior to joining Newstar in 2009, Ken was a co-founder of a domain name registration, parking auction service provider in Beijing, China. I didn't know that. Next to Ken is Juan Diego Calle, CEO of the .co registry. So Juan is a serial entrepreneur and founder of .co. And under Juan's leadership, .co was launched internationally in July 2010 and has quickly become one of the most successful domain extensions in history. So I think certainly Juan will have a lot to talk about here on this panel. And last but not least, to Juan's left is Michele Jourdan, manager of new gTLD communications at ICANN. Michele manages the gTLD communications efforts there and serves as a spokesperson for the program globally and as point person in the global launch. So again, someone who, along with the rest of our panelists, will have a lot to say about new gTLDs. So with that, I will turn it over to Mason, and I see his chicken scratch on the yellow paper here. Let's see what you have to say, Mason.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm grateful to be able to go first because if any of you know Ken or Juan or Michele, there's absolutely no point in trying to follow any of them, and so I'm happy to be going first, and it's a pleasure to be part of this panel. I wanted to talk just briefly about the concept of new TLDs, and I know the other panelists will have other things to say about that, but just to provide some context for why we're talking about TLDs and why it should be of interest to all of us here at DomainFest. So back in the Stone Age, before the internet and before Al Gore invented it and ICANN perfected it, the internet was, the domain name system really was a communications tool for the defense industry and then for academics. It didn't really start taking off until commercial interests were added. I'm sure we all remember that day. So it was clear at that point, though, that domain names, .com, .net, and .org, and a big rise up in the silo of those TLDs, it wasn't going to be able to be constrained to those TLDs forever, right? And now we have 22 generics and a couple of hundred of country code TLDs, and the net is overdue for expansion. And that's why we're all writhing around in activity here trying to get ready for TLD expansion. But we knew the competition theory was good. It would benefit the internet. And now that there's more knowledge about the internet and new adoption coming into play around the world, both in ASCII characters, right, the Roman characters that we all communicate in English, but also in native scripts, like Cyrillic for Russian and kanji for Japanese, the net is really going to widen out, and you're going to see accelerated adoption. And that growth and competition is good. It's good for the internet. It's good for world communication. It's going to be good for domain name investors. And we'll talk a little bit about why. So what are TLDs going to look like when they come into play? They're going to be in 3 categories. There's going to be generics, right, like dictionary words. There will be geographic names, like .California, for example. And then there will be brand names, like .IBM. Some of those will have what's called community, right? The applicants will claim community, meaning they've got a community of stakeholders in a certain area, like maybe attorneys who apply for .law can claim community. So those will be a little bit different from geos. And then we've talked about IDNs, internationalized domain names in native scripts. So when you see the names added to the root, they're gonna be in those kinds of categories. So what's happening now with new TLDs? A couple of things. On January 12th, the application window opened for applicants to apply for their what's called a string of characters, everything right of the dot. That application window closes in April. And then, I'm sorry, Michele, is it May 1st when we're going to have the reveal?
On or around there.
Yeah. So before too long, before we all meet again, we'll know what strings are being applied for, we'll know who's applying for them, and where there's going to be contention. But meantime, providers are gearing up. Companies like Ken and his colleagues at Newstar and other back-end providers are working with applicants to get their registries in order. There are things like trademark protection mechanisms that are being put into place. So there's lots of activity and preparation for this before the names get into the root. So why is all this important to those of us here in the room, right? What does this mean for your domain name portfolio? Well, I think most of the advice out in the marketplace is certainly don't be afraid of new TLDs. Get familiar with the concept of what they are, and if you're the objective of new TLDs is bringing competition and consumer choice to the internet. So it doesn't mean, for example, we need to dilute .com or we need to try to do something about .net. It's just adding competition at the top level domain, at the top level itself, so that there's new choices for consumers. So the words and concepts that you own in your current portfolio, right? They represent ideas, they represent data, information, products, those kinds of things. The value is in those words. The value will be added in the top level domain, but the concepts that you own now in your current portfolio can be applied to the new TLDs as well. So it's sort of like you have 13 original colonies in the U.S. and now we're opening it up for westward expansion. That's the analogy that's sometimes used. So all that land is going to be out there and be valuable. I'm not going to talk about that. You guys already know about that. So how can you apply and evaluate your current investment principles to maximize traffic in your new TLDs? So what you should be watching for, and I think the other panelists may talk a bit about, is what registries and registrars are doing to incentivize the marketplace. You're going to see lots of new ideas about how domain names are presented to the marketplace that you haven't seen before. I don't know what they are, but I know that they're coming. And if you're not already talking to your registrar and potential applicants about what's in it for domain name investors, now's a good time to do that. It's certainly not too early to do that. So what should you do meantime? Well, I know that the domain name investment community doesn't historically care about what's happening with ICANN, but it's a good idea to pay attention to what is happening with ICANN so that you can anticipate the approach of new TLDs and what rules are going to be applied to you as investors. Right now, ICANN is where the action is, and I know Michelle's going to talk a bit more about that. But it is important to know what's happening in the policymaking arena so that you can anticipate when the marketplace is going to be opened up for TLDs. So keep tabs on this. It's going to be an exciting development for the internet, and there's lots of opportunity out there for investors. And I'll conclude there, Todd, and turn it over to Ken. Thank you.
All
everyone. Good morning. I think this is my fourth DomainFest talking about new gTLDs and how they're coming very soon. I'm getting a nickname. I think I'm known as the little boy that cried gTLD. But this time it's actually for real. And as you know, ICANN's opened the application window, and applicants have started to submit their applications into the system. So I couldn't be more excited than to be here today. It's a very busy time. The application window closes on April 12th. So working with a number of applicants, a lot of very exciting ideas out there. I also remember last year looking out on this crowd and saying I was kind of disappointed that the domainer community hadn't got more involved in new gTLDs, because I think the people in this crowd, the people that attend this conference, are amongst the most qualified applicants for new gTLDs. You know the value of a domain name. You know how to value a brand or a name. And so I think there is a lot of potential in the domainer community. Over the last year, things have changed quite a bit. Actually, opinion has shifted a little bit. A lot of the leaders in the industry, at least a few of them, have now come out in favor of new gTLDs, have gotten directly involved in new gTLDs. So and I'm very pleased with the progress I've seen and the interest I've seen from the domainer community in the last year. So let me start by talking about what we can expect in terms of new gTLDs. This slide are examples of the kinds of new gTLDs we'll see come to market. So they'll be, of course, generic keyword TLDs like .web, .site. There'll be some cause-based TLDs. We have our partners from Greene here today in the audience with us. They'll be applying for Greene. We'll be their registry service provider. There'll be TLDs that are there to serve communities like .gay. We're working with an applicant for the .gay gTLD to serve the gay community. There'll be city TLDs like .nyc. The city of New York has announced that they intend to apply for .nyc. And for the first time in history, brands will be able to apply for their own top-level domains. So you may see a .bmw or a .nike or a .ibm. I think that is a key fact. It's one of the things that makes this round of new gTLDs different from past rounds. You know, look at who the major advertisers are in mass media. It's these major brands. Right? The first time a major pharmaceutical company advertises their product on primetime television and uses their top-level domain, millions, tens of millions of people will see that there are other things to the right of the dot. Not overnight, but over time, consumers will start to pay attention to what is to the right. I mean, in Europe, this is pretty commonplace now. People are used to seeing multiple TLDs. In US and North America, not so much, right? But my theory, I think it's a good one, is that as these major brands, and I'm talking with a number of them now, I know they do plan not only to apply, but to use their TLDs in mass marketing and advertising. That begins a shift in the mindset of the consumer and opens them up to these other possibilities. Once consumers accept that, then businesses, other businesses will accept that as well. I think that's kind of the foundation, the virtuous cycle that's going to be set up, that's going to lead to success in this new round of new gTLDs. So here's the general timeline. I said before, the application window opened on January 12th. It closes on April 12th. Hundreds, some say over 1,000 applicants are expected to apply to ICANN for new TLDs. Most of those will likely be brands, but there'll also likely be over 100, maybe hundreds of generic keyword TLD applications as well. So application window closes on April 12th. ICANN begins to evaluate these applications. On May 1st, the big unveiling, right? On May 1st, ICANN is actually going to unveil who applied, what TLDs they applied for. Where I think a group of us are planning an event in Las Vegas, kind of like the Grammys or the Emmys, where this unveiling happens. Some fistfights will break out. You know, some people will be elated at what they see. Some lawsuits will be filed. All kinds of things will be happening. But it's going to be an exciting time, and we're going to have some fun in Las Vegas when we do that. In November, the evaluations, what they call the simple evaluations, should be complete. By simple, I mean there's only one applicant. There are no objections. It's pretty straightforward. In this case, since there's one applicant, ICANN enters into a contract with this other party, and by January of 2013, you'll start to see the first new gTLDs come to market. So what are we going to see in January 2013? I think what we're most likely to see are cities, because for a city gTLD application, they have to have the endorsement or a letter of non-objection from the city itself. So there can only be one applicant for .nyc. There can only be one applicant for .paris, right? So the city TLDs will be amongst that first batch. The next group of TLDs will be for smaller niche gTLDs for which there's only one applicant, right? And then the third will be the brands, because many of them are trademarks. There'll only be one applicant. So that's kind of the first wave of gTLDs coming to market. For the others, where there are multiple applicants, they'll have an opportunity to negotiate with one another. If they can come to an accommodation, then their application will move forward. If they can't, there'll be an auction, right? So in the auction, the highest bidder wins. So between negotiations, auctions, perhaps some objections, maybe some lawsuits, there'll be a second wave of gTLDs in the second half of 2013, and some might not even show up till 2014. But expect hundreds, if not over 1,000, applications to be unveiled on May 1st. So is a gTLD a good investment? Well, do the math, right? Without pointing to a specific TLD, let's say you had a TLD that managed to get 100,000 registrations. That's not huge. It's not the smallest TLD either, but relatively conservative. If you got 100,000 and each one, let's say, had a wholesale price of $10, that's $1 million in annual revenue. And guess what? This isn't like a domain name where you buy it and then you sell it to somebody else and you're done. The revenue comes every year. Of course, there's a lot more to an investment than the revenue side. There's the cost, there's the registry cost, there's marketing costs. But a relatively small TLD, 100,000, you might not invest that much in marketing. It's a good business. And there are quite a few TLDs that have the potential to do 100,000 names. So that's the TLD side. How about for domainers? What are the opportunities in terms of monetizing these new TLDs? Well, there's not a lot of direct navigation traffic in new TLDs. Right? Users don't go, I wonder what's in something.biz, or I wonder what's in something.info. That doesn't happen in new gTLDs. So they're really about development and SEO and natural search results and getting a good name and finding that retail buyer for that name. Finding the company or the end user who's going to develop the site. That's where the opportunity is for the domainer community. So I just ran some numbers. I know you people in this group are probably far more familiar with me about keyword tools and how to analyze the potential of a domain name. I just did that with some of these top-level domains. So that you see the number of searches. Music, 9,560,000 million searches per month, right? Huge number of searches for the keyword music. Actually, that's the number of search results, I'm sorry. That's the number of indexed pages in Google. And then you see the number of searches and the cost per click. So the one way to look at a gTLD is very much the way you look at an individual domain name. It's looking at statistics like this. Then I thought, well, let me see how many. What I did here is this is a Google hack. If you do site // keyword .star, you'll find out how many domain names are indexed in Google that start with something, keyword .something. So in this case, it's something law .something, right? So that kind of tells you if there are these domain names out here that have keyword law, they end in law, they're good candidates for .law domain names, right? So when you run that search, that query on Google, you come up with over 4 million results. So there are 4 million domain names that have law at the end of the domain name. And then this is just another example. I ran this on web, and there are over 9 million. And then I figured, well, let's get down to the domain name level. So here's a search on law, but I looked down at the keywords, two keyword names. If you look at some of these names, I'd look in particular at the ones that end in law. So admiralty.law. I'm not sure I think that's maritime law or something. Admiralty.law has only 9,000 searches, but it's $24 per click. And then criminal.law, 823,000 global searches, $18 per click, right? So criminal.law is obviously a very valuable name. If developed, it's going to get a lot of traffic and potentially get a lot of clicks. So just a little bit about Newstar. We run a number of TLDs today. We provide gTLD applicants with all of the technology and operation support they need to apply and launch and operate their new gTLD. We operate .biz and .us. With our partners, we operate .travel, .tel, and most recently, we were proud to launch .co with our partners, Co-Internet, and their team. This is my contact information. If you go to kenhansen.tel, you'll see all my contact information, and I look forward to any questions you might have today. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Nice to see some friendly faces that I haven't seen in a while. And thank you to the folks at DomainFest for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to give some thoughts on new TLDs. Obviously, a pretty interesting moment for us as a company. So let's start with some deep thoughts on new TLDs. I'll summarize them really quick, then we'll go over them one by one. There is demand. There is real use. It's a very, very challenging market environment. We'll talk about why. And I'm going to discuss some of the implications for domain investors. So in terms of demand, we'd like to think there is demand. We launched .co July 20th of 2010 and have since grown to 1.2 million registrations. Clearly, that's come with significant marketing investment, and I think that's going to apply throughout the new TLD space. You're going to see these companies really becoming marketing companies and not utilities, how TLDs have generally been treated in the past. So things like landing a deal with Twitter, Overstock, before our launch, really built up a lot of momentum to get the space, built up a credibility in the space before the launch. Obviously, things like the Super Bowl ad with GoDaddy, which we're going to have another one this coming weekend, is pretty exciting. getting Google to approve us as what now a new acronym in the ICANN world, the gCC-TLD, literally a term now used by Google, and selling names to really high-profile users, again, to build the credibility, like Amazon, billboards in Times Square, billboards in Union Square. So we really pulled out all the stops in getting .co marketed. That's what it's going to take to get these new TLDs off the ground. But if they do that, there's going to be significant demand, and we're going to look at some of those things now. What are the demand drivers? What's the value proposition that's driving that demand? In our case, number one, it's the term CO. It's been used throughout history to mean company. It's easy for us to get out there and start marketing our name. We don't have to do a lot of effort in explaining to people what it is, particularly in Europe, where, in the case of .co.uk, it's already used in the ccTLD. In many other countries, it's the same thing. Another big part of our value proposition is short URLs. So anything that's mobile, social, and search, very important for you to have a short URL. We're doing really well in that area. And obviously, there's availability. So in our company, we like to think that the internet's going to be big. We're at 2 billion users now. That's definitely going to grow at least to 5 billion in the next decade. And .com is becoming a scarce resource. So available inventory has been a big part of our value proposition. And I just put number 4 in there to show you that it's not one country. This is happening globally. 50% in North America. Europe represents about 22%. Of that, UK is about 12% of our market. So it's pretty big. Deep thought number 2, there's real use, absolutely. In the case of big brands, we've got companies like Twitter, again, Google, Amazon, using their .co for innovative and new products. It's hard to get one of these companies to rebrand, and God knows there's problems when they do that. But in general, they are looking for ways to innovate online, and new TLDs are a good option for them to do that with. Tech influencers, which in general give you a sense of what's to come. They're the early adopters in any industry. In our industry, the case of companies like Angel.co, 500 startups, Malik from GigaOM, Founder Institute, these are all companies that are using .co. Again, influencers that give you a sense of what's to come. And this doesn't apply to .co alone. It applies to .me. It applies to some of the other extensions out there that are gaining a lot of traction, .io, for example. It's happening. And in our case, again, really the core of our market are the entrepreneurs and startups that are getting online today. We're not talking about the web that happened in the last 25 years. We're talking about the web that's going to happen in the next 25. And that's our sweet spot as a company. Companies that need something short, something that's SEO friendly, and that it's available for a reasonable price. These are just some good examples. Deep thought number 3. It's a very, very challenging environment, and let's get into why. Now, in terms of the market size, really getting into the specifics of it, you have about 2 million domain names registered every month, 2 million new ones. Of that, we figured, and this is our internal numbers, that about 50 to 30% are crap. And crap, there's a little footnote down there that says automated registrations, monetization, tasting, upsells, etc. Those are not real end-user domains. We figure there's only 1 million that are being registered on a monthly basis that actually are considered part of a target market that we can address in the new TLD space. So let's just throw out some numbers. What are we going to get with new TLDs? 5% of that 1 million, maybe 20 if we're aggressive and we spend a lot of money on marketing. So there you're talking about a range of 50,000 to 200,000 names. Let's call it 100,000 domain names. 100,000 domain names per month that we could potentially register in new TLDs. That's not a lot. It's not a lot, but if you address it with high premium value-added TLDs, you can get very nice margins from that. So while the volume may not be large, if you address it with a value proposition that really adds value to the user experience or to your customers, then we could be talking about big numbers. But in terms of volume, it's not. It's a very tough distribution environment. That would be my next challenge. We're talking, and by that I mean, if you look at the registrar space, it's very concentrated. There are clearly 5 companies, 5 or 6, that command the market share for new registrations. And of that, we all know that one of them represents 50% of it. So getting into the channel for new TLDs is going to be very, very difficult. Add to that the fact that you're going to have hundreds of new ones coming online. And keep in mind, I'm addressing my presentation mostly from the point of view of generic TLDs. So clearly there's going to be more brands, but that's a different story. In terms of the generics, they're going to be fighting for this available distribution or trying to go it alone, going to the consumer directly. And that's tough. Getting to the consumer directly is very, very difficult. Obviously, there's low awareness. I mean, we face it every day. That's our biggest challenge as a company, is building awareness, and that's why we do all these fancy things, the Super Bowl and this and that. And that's why we're so excited about new TLDs, because when all these companies come online, Ken already alluded to that, that's going to help us generate awareness for the fact that there is something other than .com and .org, .net, and the ccTLDs that we commonly see out there. So awareness is tough. Those are the challenges. That's the market that we're dealing with. And what are the deep thought number 4? What are the implications for investors? And here we're talking about 3 to 5 years down the line when some of these new TLDs have come into the market and are spending significant amounts of money getting themselves marketed to the end user. I think super premium .coms, and I'm saying this not as a .co CEO, I'm saying this, I actually own another company which is .com entirely. It's a portfolio of travel names. So we've talked about these things internally in that company. And clearly, 3 to 5 years down the line, the super premium stuff will hold its value. It always will. It's beachfront property, right? It doesn't matter what happens in the real estate market. Typically, beachfront property holds its value. The premium stuff is where you're going to start seeing some prices stabilize. And maybe even go down. And I think you're going to start seeing a redefinition of what super premium, and what I call everything else. The super premium stuff, some of that stuff will filter down to the premium. Some of the premium stuff will filter down to everything else. And clearly, everything else will price adjust. Because when you flood the market with new inventory and a ton of marketing, inevitably, prices are going to go down. And you're going to see price disruption for investors. For new TLD investors, and I think two types of investors. One, the ones that are putting money into the space, and then the ones that are buying them into the actual registries, and the ones that are actually buying names. I think this applies to both. You have to invest in TLDs that have the potential to become brands. You have to forget about the term registry, forget about ccTLD, TLD, all these stupid acronyms. From a marketing standpoint, they make no sense. The consumer doesn't care. So you really have to invest in things that are going to become brands that add value that have some value proposition to a consumer. You have to get under the hood, just like you're buying stock. You have to understand who the team is, what their financials are, who's running their technology, and again, their value proposition. Understand the distribution model. I pointed out the biggest challenge is distribution. And understand who their target market is. Can they address that target market in a very clear way? Can they go after it with some clear initiatives? And what is it that they're doing to get to it? So as you can see, it's the shift of TLDs going from being utilities to becoming marketing companies and just more like traditional startups, like a Google, like a Twitter, like a Facebook. That's what you need to look for in the new TLD space. And that is it. Looking forward to the questions, and hope to see you on Wednesday night when we unveil our Super Bowl model. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Michele, Jourdan, manager of new gTLD communications at ICANN. This is my first time speaking at DomainFest, so thank you for having me. Really appreciate it. I was looking at the DomainFest website last night, and I saw the question, why attend? And it said, online marketers, publishers, and domain investors attend DomainFest events to share insights, uncover emerging trends, and discuss best practices needed to be successful. And something in that sentence caught my eye. It was uncover emerging trends. And I thought, new gTLDs isn't just an emerging trend. It quite possibly could be the biggest thing to happen to the internet since funny cat videos. The new gTLD program is going to provide a blank canvas for innovators to innovate. What we're doing with this program is basically removing the artificial barrier of 22 gTLDs that are in the root currently, and basically opening the door for any organization anywhere in the world to apply to run almost any name in any language. So it's definitely a very exciting time in internet innovation. ICANN is based on the multi-stakeholder model. So everything we do is done in a bottom-up, consensus-driven way. So that means if you participate in ICANN, you probably had a hand in forming this whole program. And the program did not happen quickly. It's been 6 years in the making. The policy development process began in December of 2005, and that policy was finally approved in June of 2000. In October 2008, and between 2008 and 2011, we posted 7 drafts of the applicant guide, factoring in over 2,400 public comments. Sorry. The program were finally approved at our meeting in Singapore on June 20th, 2011. So since June 20th, there have been over 10,000 articles written about the program. In some of those articles, we're finding there's been confusion between registering a second-level domain and operating a top-level domain. So I just want to make sure that everyone's on the same page. gTLD stands for generic top-level domain, and it's the part of the domain name to the right of the last dot. It's not the same thing as registering a second level. It's a business commitment to run a registry business, and you're actually running to run a critical piece of internet infrastructure. So applying for a gTLD is a very lengthy, complex, and not inexpensive process. Just the evaluation fee alone is $185,000. And applicants still need to factor in cost for their back-end services, business marketing expenses, just to name a few. The applicant guidebook is over 300 pages. And the questionnaire that applicants will need to fill out is 50 questions that span about 41 pages. So again, lengthy and complex. So when applying, applicants need to be able to demonstrate that they are technically, operationally, and financially capable of running a registry. So basically, there's going to be 2 tests that the evaluators are going to look at. One is they're going to look at the string. They're going to make sure that the string applied for is not going to break the internet, and it's not going to confuse users. So it can't be confusingly similar to something that's already out there. And then they're going to look at the applicant. They're going to do a background check of the applicant. They're going to make sure that they're technically, operationally, and financially capable of running the registry. And they're going to look to be sure that they have all the appropriate approvals that they need. So for instance, if someone applies for a for a geographic name, they're going to make sure they have the government approvals necessary. Or if they apply for a community TLD, they have to have endorsements from the community that they're seeking to serve. So since the application window opened in January this year, everything's been going smoothly. We haven't run into any problems that we haven't been able to fix quickly. There have been minor updates to the TLD application system that, based on feedback we've received. So no challenges is a good thing. March 29th is actually the next deadline coming up, and that's when, so you're planning to apply, you need to be registered in the TLD application system. The reason why we have this registration deadline is because if the registration process can take several days to complete, and you won't actually get access to TAS to submit your final application and your remaining evaluation fee until we receive your initial $5,000 deposit. And then the deadline to actually have your application submitted and pay the final fee is April 12th of this year. Now, unfortunately, I can't give you too many details about what we've received so far. ICANN is holding those numbers really close to its chest, and so much so that there's only a handful of ICANN staff who even know the exact numbers, and I'm not one of them. We're not even sharing it with our executive team or our board of directors. And the reason we're doing this is really to limit conflicts of interest and competition issues. But I can tell you that people have begun registering in TAS. So far, as of the 19th of January, we've received 25 registrants in the TLD application system. Now, 25 registrants doesn't equal 25 applications, because each applicant, each registrant can apply for up to 50 TLDs. So what's next? Well, the next major deadline is March 29th. If you're going to apply, that's when you need to be registered in TAS. After that, it's April 12th. That's the close of the application window. And then, as they've mentioned before, May 1st is the big day, on or around May 1st, when we're actually going to post on our website who has applied for what. And this is a really exciting day, even for us at ICANN, because most of us don't know that information. So we'll all be finding out at the same time. So we are estimating that in the first quarter of 2013, that's the earliest we could see new TLDs coming into the route, but then it's up to the new registry to decide how and when they're going to introduce their new TLD to the world. So I imagine this is a pretty exciting time for domainers as well. 2013 could usher in a whole new era of domain name innovation, but I guess it's really up to you. Thanks.
Okay, let's talk. Obviously, very appreciative that everyone was able to kind of share some initial thoughts. I think all of you kind of addressed it in a bit of a different way. Just kind of thinking about some questions here. I think a lot of us in the audience have seen new TLDs before. Some have been successfully launched, like .co. Others have not. And I think probably just kind of the starting question that probably I think people would be interested in is how is this process going to be different from before? Obviously, there have been opportunities where ICANN has opened up new TLDs, and again, some have been successful and some have not. How is this going to be different than what they've done before? So, Michele, since you have the mic, you want to? I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question? Sure. The question is, how is this new gTLD process going to be different than what's done before in terms of when there's been an expansion of new TLDs, new ccTLDs, I think as Juan had referred to it.
So is this on? Okay. So we had 2 trial rounds before in the year 2000 and year 2004 that introduced new TLDs. This round is going to be different because this time we have lots of new protections added into the program. Protections for trademark. We have the trademark clearinghouse. We have the URS uniform rapid suspension, which allows really quick takedown for clear-cut cases of abuse. There's lots of malicious conduct protections built into the program. So we really think that the introduction of the new gTLDs is going to make the whole domain space much safer than it has been in the past.
Okay. Ken or Juan, do you want to comment on the question?
Sure. Or is this working? I think you're working. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, all right. So I think there are a couple of fundamental differences. One is, again, this concept of utility versus a marketing company startup. Some of the ones that were launched in the past were launched as utilities, not with very little marketing sense to them. And I think the ones that are coming online now are coming in with huge amounts of money, and they're going to market them. They're going to market those extensions properly. And I think that number 2 is a very basic fact of business and the process of innovation, and it's a trial and error process. And frankly, I don't think enough have been launched in the past to really allow for that trial and error process to occur naturally. You have to let these things get launched, and some of them will fail. A lot of them will fail, in fact. from every single website that is started on the left of the dot, whatever it is, I get confused left, right. On the left of the dot, how many fail? Hundreds of thousands, if not millions per year. That's the kind of trial and error process that needs to happen at the right of the dot. And I think by liberalizing TLDs, essentially, in the big way that ICANN is doing it now, you're going to see that happen.
Yes, Ken,
just
go ahead.
briefly, what I said earlier is I think one of the most important differentiators. That is, brands are getting involved, brands advertise, users will see domain names with their TLDs, and they'll help consumers get acclimated. But I think first, let's acknowledge, personally, I think Biz is successful, and so is Info, and so are many of the existing, what you might call new gTLDs. I mean, most of the applicants applying today would be very happy to get 2.3 million registrations or 8 million registrations. That's a very good business, and it demonstrates there's demand out there, just like Code did recently. So, there's been success. What is different, though, because not all new gTLDs have been successful in the past, there are some differences. I think the new gTLDs that are coming to market, many of them are very, very targeted. There are a lot of potential TLDs that focus on specific industries that do a lot of advertising. And I think that's the key. If you look at some of the TLDs that didn't achieve very high volume, look at what industries they're in, look at what communities they were intended to serve. Those industries don't advertise very much. Mm-hmm. So I think that's another difference.
Right. I think along with that, I think both what I've heard Juan and Ken say are kind of one of the differences between this gTLD launch and what I've done previously is because it's opened up, there's a lot more opportunities for brands to get involved. And you can see people using this as kind of an opportunity to kind of market their brand. And I know, Mason, that you had mentioned in your remarks that when you think back to when kind of the internet was kind of first getting started and people were kind of using it as a community for kind of people to come on and learn things about various areas. Some critics have complained that the expansion of gTLDs as kind of a branding or mechanizing advertising, mostly for advertisers, kind of somewhat defeats the purpose of kind of the internet as kind of building a community and building kind of more awareness. How would you respond to that kind of criticism that it really is just all going to be about just .brands and that's really what's going to happen?
Well, I'd respond by saying it's not going to be all about .brands. I mean, there's a great opportunity for using the addressing system to brand your company or your products, and that's very true. And I do think we're going to see quite a few brand applications, but it's certainly not going to be limited to just that, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, there are. I know there are applicants here. I see Annalisa from Greene. Greene has been on the map, almost since the beginning as that's not a brand application in terms of what we're talking about. It's a community-oriented, cause-driven TLD, and there are going to be lots of those. I mean, we're going to have geo names. We will have some branded names, but we're going to have a very healthy gTLD, generic name environment. And I think, I'm not trying to cheerlead the program, but there's going to be a lot of very interesting stuff that comes out of these applications. When we do the reveal in May, it's going to be very, very interesting to see what sorts of plans the generic and geo communities have for their TLDs and how those are going to be brought to market. I don't know what they're going to be like, but they're all going to be very interesting. So I don't buy the argument that it's simply a branding exercise. I think it's much wider than that.
Juan
or Michele, do you want to comment on that question?
I was just going to say that I think another really cool thing about this is that now it's not just the ASCII characters. I mean, people can apply to have the TLDs in any word in any language, which I think is really going to open up, and it's just a really cool thing.
I think along with that, and Juan, I'm going to ask you this question and kind of talk about the end users. Obviously the kind of the question that I had just mentioned was kind of are kind of brands really just going to use it as more of kind of a captive TLD and just use it for their own marketing purposes as opposed to more of a kind of community of people. Obviously with your successful launch of .co, what's your sense of whether people are going to be embracing, the kind of, the new TLD? Obviously, they've done a good job in embracing .co, but I mean, at some point, are there just going to be kind of too many TLDs and people are just going to get completely confused and just kind of go run back to the other kind of TLDs that people are familiar with? How would you respond?
So I think if you look at our base, it's a clear indication that that's not it. We're seeing, if we look at our registrations on an hourly basis, and we look at what's being registered, and it's the lion's share of the stuff that's being registered are small and medium-sized businesses that need an online presence. Mm-hmm. It's simple as that, and .co offers them that alternative. In terms of them running back, absolutely not. I think there's definitely going to be a period of confusion, maybe a little bit of consumer backlash, like what the hell's going on with my internet kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But again, once you see the big brands using it, once you see big examples of existing brands that are innovating with new TLDs, that sort of thing, it's going to be a slow process, but it's going to happen where consumer awareness will be at a level where everyone's just accepted the fact that it is different after the dot. Yeah.
Right. Picking up on that idea of, and I know, Ken, you had mentioned this in your kind of presentation, you had kind of talked about and you had given some stats about number of searches that are done for various keywords, number of results that are there. I think one of the points that's been made is there's really kind of a fundamental shift in terms of how people are going to think about how to search on the internet. And obviously I think that's very important for people here in this audience who have a portfolio of names that are based on kind of natural direct type in traffic, kind of how people think about search and how people think about direct navigation. What's your sense of how an expansion of the TLDs in this manner in such a broad fashion, how is it going to change the way that kind of people think about search and the way that people look for things on the internet?
Personally, I don't think it's going to change how people think about search, but you do have to give some thought to how it will affect search and the search results, in particular the natural search results. And I think the people in this room understand as much as you can understand about the Google algorithm, and that is it's looking for good content, compelling content, interesting content, fresh content, to deliver to users when they search. And it's largely agnostic to the TLD. If you've got a great .biz site with lots of great content, fresh content, and it's relevant to a particular set of keywords, you have every opportunity to be on that first page as any other TLD. And the same thing's going to hold true for the new TLDs. It's all about giving users what users want. Users aren't looking for TLDs. Users are not looking for domain names. Users are looking for content. And if the branding, the keywords match the content, it is good branding, and the content is there, users it'll show up on that first page of search results.
Hansen, any thoughts on that question in terms of kind of changing kind of in-user intent in terms of how they think about search?
No, I agree with Ken. I think that's true. I mean, at the end of the day, you're on the internet to find a product, a piece of data, an idea, to put something out there yourself, perhaps. But the internet's a content-driven system. I mean, I would like to add to the idea about what's going to happen at the time of launching and sort of consumer fatigue over TLDs, because I do think there's going to be a period, as Juan said, of a fair amount of confusion, because most of us have been sort of marinating in this idea of new TLDs for 6 years, or a period between now and 6 years ago, and you're starting to see, as word is getting out about the expansion of the TLD space, people are sort of sitting up and realizing, I didn't know this was coming, and what does it mean? And you may have seen that the advertising community got very up in arms about the idea of TLD expansion and what that meant for them, and they launched a big barrage of sort of anti-TLD propaganda. And I don't think you're going to see that coming from the consumer side, or understanding what that means for search, but you will be seeing consumers saying, I didn't know this was coming. I'm not sure what to do. I'm going to have to rely on Google, or, as Juan said, when you see validation from a big company who uses Amazon.book instead of Amazon.com, or Domino's.pizza instead of Domino'sPizza.com, you're going to have a shift in the marketplace of understanding what all that means. More reliance on search, and then finally clarity as people understand what's happening to as Juan appropriately put it, my internet, right? I don't understand it.
Just one quick thing to add. I mean, new TLDs will create new, we all know that exact match domains with good content rank very well, right? New gTLDs are going to create more opportunities for domainers and others to buy exact match names, provide, add content, get on that first page of Google. So, divorcelaw.com, well, that's already gone. Maybe somebody in the room has it. You can't buy that again unless it's up for auction. But, there's a new set of names coming to market, and divorce.law is going to be one of those names. And there are many, many other examples of increased exact match availability. So that I think is a big opportunity.
All right, I'm getting these signals here that I need to wrap it up. Let me just ask each member of the panel to just kind of comment very briefly on one last question, and I'm going to start with you, Michele, which is, what's the number one kind of most important thing that you think that the audience kind of needs to take away from the new gTLD that's being rolled out?
Well, I guess I would say, don't be scared of them. Embrace them because they're coming. And I really think it's a neat new opportunity for you guys to connect with your customers and your audience in new innovative ways and new fresh ways, and can also increase trust in who your content is for.
All right, Juan?
Yeah, I think biggest takeaway, and again, I'm going to try to be neutral here from, as a .com investor in some cases and the CEO of .co. I think the biggest thing is, particularly for new people in the industry, we keep hearing this thing about .com is king. There's no doubt that it's king. No one's going to argue that. And it's, again, prime real estate is always going to be prime real estate. But there are big opportunities in the space, and you don't have to sort of dwell in this issue of .com is king all the time. There really are big opportunities for people coming into the industry now, but you're going to have to do your homework.
Okay, Ken?
I think the most important thing you can take away from today is something that Juan touched on, which is do your homework. Many of you specialize in particular vertical markets or health domains or legal domains, whatever it might be. Well, gee, if there's a TLD that's coming in your particular space, start preparing now. Do your homework, figure out where the opportunities are. There are pre-registrations being taken by some registrars. Do all that groundwork that you can do to prepare for the coming launch.
All right, Mason.
Well, Ken said what I was going to say. I don't wait around, and don't be skeptical of new TLDs. Embrace the idea because there's lots of opportunity, but don't wait until they're admitted into the root and it's about time for land rush. Talk to registrars right now about what their plans are for new TLDs and what they mean for you, because by the time we get to land rush, you want to be the ones who have outsmarted the market at that point, not the other way around.
Okay. All right, I appreciate everyone's time here. Unfortunately, we ran out of time for the Q&A, but Michele, Juan, Ken, Mason, and I will be around afterwards as we take a break for a bit. And then back here at 11 a.m. for Deborah Domeyer, our co-CEO, to give her opening remarks. Was there anything else, Deborah, that you wanted to say before we're? Okay. All right, I think with that, we're going to take a break for a bit, and we'll see you back here at 11 o'clock.